empowering the blind to be excellent, do more, and live with greater success. This show is for you and about you. Welcome to the Delivering Access Podcast.
So we are back with another episode of the Delivering Access Podcast. Today I am pleased to welcome our guest, Dr. Leo A. Bissonnette. Leo, are you prepared to empower?
Indeed I am. I'm ready to rock and roll this morning.
Ready to rock and roll. What's with all you Canadians who are wanting to rock and roll? Everyone I've had on has either been a rock star in their previous history or just want to rock and roll. Is that a theme in Canada?
I don't know about that, but I could also throw in a couple of A's.
I got it.
You on with Tom Decker if you want that back.
Yeah, that's where I get it from. And I have a blind Canadian web designer as well, and he does the A's and all that. So yeah, cool.
I will tell you though that Tom comes by the rock and roll more honesty than I do. He knows more about music. I can't even play a stereo.
We got to get you some accessible buttons on there.
Oh, I can do that. I just can't sing.
There you have it. Well, Leo, we're going to dive right in. Tell us about where you grew up, how you became blind, and some of the tools that you have used along your way.
I lost my sight because of being born prematurely, 2 months premature, retinopathy prematurity. And as a result, even 10 years ago, I further lost vision through cataracts and glaucoma. I was born in Montreal, here in Quebec, a major city in Canada. And I went to school at the Montreal Association for the Blind and was integrated into high school. That was at first for many here in Montreal at the time in 1966. And after high school, I went on to Loyola College, where I obtained my Honours B.A. in Sociology and a master's degree in Sociology. And in the mid-1970s, where things really get interesting, I started my PhD in Sociology at McGill. And that was where things really began to change in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I was faced with a challenge at the time when I started that PhD program to take a course in advanced statistics. And one of the things we had to do was handle something called the Statistical Package for the Social Sciences, SPSS. It's still around. It was then done through punch cards, something I couldn't get at. But as a happy circumstance, through the Montreal Association for the Blind, they found me a volunteer, a professor in computer science, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who helped me get the work done. But along the way, he talked about his own vision of where computers should be for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That included the disabled. And he was working with graduate students in his lab on the first voice editor on an old Osborne computer, if you can believe that far back. And through that, I began to see the first screen reader. We also then got our hands on an IBM PC through a donation, and we modified designed a program that gave us another voice editor, so I got hooked.
Mm-hmm.
Sociology, I left it behind. Never finished the doctorate, but I became a TA for Professor Krishnan. We created eventually, or he created more accurately, through the political science faculty, a design for the visually impaired in computers. And that got us going. From there, we went on to the Apple IICs. And I was hired at that time by the Montreal Association for the Blind to teach the VersaBraille, the first generation of cassette-based VersaBrailles, if anybody remembers those.
Yeah, it seems to have been a common theme on the last few shows. The VersaBraille has definitely changed some folks' lives.
And certainly for me, because I had my hand in so many different things. I wasn't working full time, but I did this, that, and the other thing. It became very clear to me that as a tool, here was a VersaBraille where no longer did I have to use a braille writer to write something up and go to a manual typewriter, have somebody proofread my material. I was able to independently write. That really further hooked me. So when I started working in rehabilitation, I could say to clients, I have tools that work for me, and I'll show you how to use them. And that became my theme in working with students, because later on I was hired back by Concordia in 1986 to be the coordinator of the Office for Students with Disabilities, a position I held until last November when I retired. It gave me a chance to work with students, not just teaching them technology, but strategies to more effectively use it. For example, in a classroom, sure, you could take a piece of technology in there and you could write notes, but how did you take good notes? Write well? How do you proofread well? That's part of it. Then we went on to look at the reading technology. More recently in Canada, we've had a problem with we lost access to a lot of the books through RFB, now Reading Outlier. We could get them on cassette, but how could we keep up to get the new form? So a lot of us began to look at scanning technologies and how we could work with the publishers in Canada. So those have been my passions and my interests. And then I finally went back to school part-time at night in 2006, I obtained my doctorate in educational technology. And there was a time when I looked at what faculty were doing or not doing as they were beginning to put more and more materials onto web pages. So those have been my passions.
And that's funny you mentioned passion, because one of the questions I usually have to just turn the page on the interview and ask, because it's kind of awkward, but I like to get it up front, is besides your passion for yourself and what you like doing, what's your passion for the blind community?
Well, I think this is why I'm so impressed with what I see you doing with your clients. When I see people like David Woodbridge doing out of Australia, Garth Humphreys out of Australia, you can go on with Larry Lewis. People are trying to empower people. You know, we're not just a statistical category of visually impaired people. We're people that live day to day, have interests to pursue, things to do, life to get on with. And if these tools can give us that power to do it, and if I can facilitate that learning process, that's what hooks me.
Wow. And I appreciate the compliment, man. My goal for the firm is to provide top-down, better than excellent consulting, teaching, and support in all of the United States. And we definitely got some good folks like yourself in Canada to even expand it there. But just leveling the playing field and in having results-based teaching where the clients come out knowing the technology and not just another course that they've taken and that they paid their money for and that they are still confused when they come out. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate that. Something that you didn't talk about that I think is very important is we talked about the VersaBraille and the older technology that you used along your journey, but what are you using right now?
Well, right now I am at home. I have the full Apple ecosystem going for me. I'm working with an iMac here this morning. I have in my briefcase my iPhone and on order a new iPhone, the 5S. So those are my personal tools right now. And I still have access to the other tools, but right now that's what's sitting in front of me and what I use on a daily basis.
Wow. So the innovations in technology, what's exciting you the most?
Well, I think what's really got my attention are the apps. You know, if you look at some of the scanning apps as an example, while they're still not where they need to be, when you look back at what we were paying for some of the products some years ago, you know, 13 ago, you know, here we have something that for, you know, a few dollars now on an iPhone has real potential. So will Prism will improve. Well, I suspect when more of us have our 5Ss and the cameras are improved as they say they are, it'll be interesting to see how people do scanning. And it's that kind of thing that I think is really what I look at more and more. What are the apps going to give us? What little tools, what little things can we pick up? That's where my attention is going these days. I listen to, for example, Garth Humphreys, and he talks about on his little podcast how to go further with your iPhone. some of the neat little jewels and tips that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Another example of fabulous things. You look at what David Woodbridge will come out with in a podcast, not to mention our good friends at Applevis. That is, I think, what really brings us together as a community. And if you have people like yourself who are down there teaching, getting it into the hands of people, and it's not just the tool that sits there, it's something that they go away from the lesson, taking into their daily lives. That's what it's got to be about. What you don't want to have happen is get some technology that sits there on the desk and gathers dust. It has to be a tool that empowers them to do some task on a daily basis. I think what a lot of our sighted friends don't understand is that we sometimes use our apps, our computers, in an equivalent way to somebody even just grabbing a pencil and paper and writing a note. That's the power for some of us. That note that you take may remind you of something you got to do that's important. Your sighted friends take that down with a pencil and paper.
Mm-hmm.
Differently. That gets us down to another level of what this technology has done on a daily basis for us. And the more that we can understand about how we can use things on a daily basis, the more we can get out of it.
Yeah. So what's your definition of empowerment?
It's the active component of being able to be knowledgeable about what you have in your hand and then how to use it to accomplish a task, do something.
Okay. So the reason why I asked you that, I actually, in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, started a chapter of the National Federation of the Blind about 7 years ago, me and just some courageous individuals. And we came up, the name of the county was Cobb County, COBB. And I came up with the Cobb County Empowerment Chapter of the National Federation of the Blind. And when I thought of that name, I wanted to know what's the definition, and it always stuck with me. So the textbook definition of empowerment is a mechanism by which individuals, groups, and communities gain mastery over their affairs. And I think that's very powerful because, when you can master something, no matter what it is, whether it's speed reading or your assistive technology or cooking, it opens up a whole new world. It's like the Tiger Woods of golf, minus the affairs, or the Michael Jordan of basketball. It opens you up to greatness. So that's the way I've always looked at that. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think what's part of that is if you can get people to feel confident in themselves, that really gets them going. That gets them out of the seat and moving. That confidence factor has got to be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we often say, if you can internalize it, and I think that confidence factor is what really says, I've got it. And I'm ready to do something, whether it be part of a group, individually, or whatever. If you've got that confidence factor, you're moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talked about Applevis and the other individuals, and I mean, we all got our little corner of the web, and we're all doing things different. But it was just thinking out of the box, not having to settle for the status quo, all because a giant like Apple said we don't have to charge them for excellent software. We can just build it when we think about the design of the operating system, and we can just build it when we think about the usability of the system, and it costs them nothing. And guess what? If we can do that, we got, a whole handful of customers that we never had before just by thinking different, So it wasn't, wow, we could make an extra $1,200 by charging them for our new screen reader technology. No, we can get a customer for life if we just help them with what they need. So, that's all part of that community. Leo, tell us what you're doing to invoke change similar to those things in the blindness community.
Well, certainly for me, when I was in my work in student services as a manager of an office for students with disabilities, there was some lobbying work that had to go on. And I mentioned earlier work on making textbooks accessible. Well, a couple of years ago, we had Canadian legislation going before Parliament that might have knocked the disabled out of the ballpark in terms of getting access to materials. So we put together a brief. We went to the Canadian Parliament, House of Commons as they call it, and presented a brief to a committee dealing with this issue. And fortunately, to make a long story a little shorter, some of the bad things were removed from the law. And I'm glad to see that maybe this will position Canada to take advantage of the treaty that seems to be coming out around access to materials. So that's been a big thing, I think, to make sure that textbooks certainly are made available to students that I served and others served. We had to move on that issue. If we hadn't have, I think we would have been really further behind the eight ball. That's an example of where I think what I've done, and it's been working with groups. I'm still active too I'm doing private consulting for students who are heading into university, offering them training on technology along with learning strategies. That's what I've been doing privately since last November and plan to continue to do that. And I have 5 clients right now privately working with me.
Okay. So you love that type of work and you're passionate about it.
And the further extension is that my daughter is working now with students with Asperger's and autism. And that's given us a further opportunity to look at, for example, how the iPad is benefiting that population. And that's further given me insights into just how important it is to have everybody look at the so-called, and I use this word, normal technology with the access built in. I think there's something really powerful to be said if we can use the mainstream products like the iPad to further empower some people. And again, some of the work that my daughter is doing sort of reinforces that. So I get a kick out of giving her a hand, and helping his daughter blaze some trails in her new career.
Yeah, it has to be a great feeling.
And that certainly brought me to understand the needs of others who are print impaired and disability otherwise challenged.
Yeah, younger people and their whole attention disorders and, all of that stuff. So
yeah,
I could see that.
I suppose depending on your position, given how technologies have evolved, some people still want the niche place technologies. And I think for those who want that, when they come to my door, I'll certainly show you a Braille sense or whatever. But at the same time, I'm really wanting to explore more and more just how effective the mainstream technologies are. And again, I look specifically at the iPad as being a real game changer for many.
Wow. Well, Leo, we have actually reached my favorite part of the show. The thunder moment, and this is where you can be most impactful, but brief and to the point. I'll ask you some questions, and you come back with mind-blowing responses. Sounds like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So being an individual that has been blind for a while, what's one of the moments where you felt like you just couldn't go anymore, just one of your down times as a blind individual?
Believe it or not, when I couldn't get a driver's license and all my friends were getting theirs, I really felt out of it.
And how did you get over it?
Well, I had good friends and, we went places together, and that still didn't exclude me from the social network and the things we were doing in high school and university. So, that was a phase. But I remember for a few weeks feeling pretty down about not being able to get a license.
Okay. And of course, we have ups and we have downs. That was one of the down times. What's one of your most exciting moments that you've had as a blind individual?
I think I defended my doctoral dissertation in 2006. It was a goal that I had abandoned at one point for some practical reasons. But when I decided to take it up again in the mid-1990s when I was working, my wife and daughter encouraged me to go back to school. I worked part-time. I was working full-time. I studied part-time, and I got it done after 14 years of sweat and tears. I did it. So I felt good when they put it in me and handed my degree.
Wow. And that is definitely a great feat to, go through the whole educational the education process from beginning to end and actually master it and get a PhD. So, I'm definitely excited for you and to have you to share that story on our show. So what would you tell a person who's just become blind? What would be your advice to them?
Take it day by day. Go through a grieving period. Feel sorry for yourself initially because it's sincere and it's there. Get it out. Mm-hmm. But then move on. Find people to help you move on. Admit that you're scared. Seek help. Reach out for help, and then take advantage of it. Take it step by step, and then set moderate goals, little goals that you can achieve that'll lead you to bigger ones.
And get some great O&M training because you're going to be walking around.
Absolutely. I mean, when I think of years ago I had one of the first O&M instructors in Canada, and now I have lying on the floor this wonderful guide dog, Addison. Where would I be without all of that? Yeah. I also say this, you talk about supports. I was so lucky. I had a mother who was really part of that generation of parent advocates who took it day by day, but she was a strong character. She learned Braille. She got friends to help tape books for me. And at a time when I was going into high school, when the high school really was no lecture of having me, she said, let them write the entrance exams. Well, after the first year, sometimes if students failed, they told her, we don't have them back. She said, we'll take it year by year. And I think it was that tremendous support that got me a long way along the road.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing about my mother. She would always say, a handicap is only in the mind. And I never really understood that until I became older and really had to fall back on that advice. But she knew me. She knew my personality. She knew I would do it, whatever it was, good or bad, if I had, an inkling of doing it. And she didn't want the barrier of you're blind to come in the way in my thought process. Because, if you're stopped mentally, it doesn't matter what you're able to do physically. You're just at a standstill. So, mothers are awesome creatures. I definitely love both my mother and father and all my siblings and some sharing love. But yeah, you're right. Mothers can make or break a child. So, we can definitely see that good rearing in you in the way that you interact with your daughter to make sure that, she learns. So cool.
I think what's so impressive about what my mother did and what others did as well, because if you look at the people even who founded Closing the Gap, they were grandparents, I believe, who had disabled children to be concerned about. It's the advocacy work they did with institutions. And that couldn't have been easy to walk into school boards and school commissions and so forth and be advocates. Mm-hmm. I really take my hat off. I mean, yeah, they loved us as, being their children and parents, but they took on the institutions. And I think, boy, that had to be hard because to bang down those doors. And, in some ways, I think what my mother shielded me from was the notion that I had to be perfect. Because, the stress, well, if you don't make it, well, you won't be part of it and you'll be, you're almost being used as a role model. My mother shielded me from that. And I came to understand that later, maybe just the role that I was taking on. Mm-hmm. Not something she made me feel that any additional pressure over.
Yeah.
And I think, boy, that had to be, what a strong character. And again, I say there was that whole generation of parents who I think did similar things.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say something about these new parents, but I think
there's a helicopter first there. That's
all right. We'll take the helicopter as the reason why we're not going to talk about the new parents.
Well, I did it for you. So.
I appreciate it.
And that's partly why I retired.
Yep. They'll come in the classroom and curse you out all because The helicopter's coming. All right, Leo, we're going to go ahead and close out. If you give us how we can reach you, one parting piece of advice, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, my parting piece of advice is take life day by day, take advantage of the opportunities that come to you, find good people to work with, and there's a lot of good people out there.
And how can we reach you?
You can reach me certainly by email at Bissonnette, Bissonnette, at Videotron, Videotron.ca. I'm on Twitter at MaxNug96. And I'll give you a cell number, too, that you can reach me at. It's area code 514-983-7290. Love to hear from anybody in Canada in particular, but anybody else around the world who'd like to talk to me, glad to connect.
Thank you. So this podcast does go out nationwide. So all of you all in Australia, give Leo a call. But I'd like to give a great thanks to Aaron Linkson, our podcast producer and sound engineer, Leo Bissonnette, our guest for today. And bye-bye for now.
Bye, Bushman. Take care.
Have a good one, Leo. I appreciate it. I'll call you later on this week.
For sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
In my traditional closing, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you are right. Think pennies, get pennies. Think dollars, get dollars. See you on the other side.
This has been a Yucca Music Group production. Website 81x.com/Yucca/X. The Yucca Music Group can be reached at 678-608-8969. All rights reserved.